The format of today's session then is that we will go through the whole year-end process for those of you working in receipts and payments. And then when we've done that, I'll let you all know. So those of you who don't need to worry about I&E can then log off if you wish. And then we'll just go through the extra bits that those of you working in income and expenditure have to consider. Okay. So initially, we're in receipts and payments for the first part of this because most of what we talk about in this section will still be relevant for those of you in I&E. Okay, let's get started then. Before we jump into the year-end menu, there are a few things that I just want to recap on. So some of this is covered in getting ready for year-end, but it's so important we can't go straight into the year-end menu without just recapping on it. The first thing is making sure that you have a reconciling bank position. So of course, at this point, although we're not at the end of March yet, when you come to do all this, we're assuming we're beyond the 31st of March. All your data is in Scribe, you've reconciled it to the bank, you've checked your coding allocations, you're happy with everything that you've done. That would be the expectation here at that point. But just to recap some of this that's really important, I'm just going to return to the bank menu and reconcile all banks. And so we would have our audit date of the 31st of March. So I'm hoping at the moment that you're reconciling on a monthly basis. If you're up to date, you'll have done February, so you're just going to have March incoming, obviously, once we get to that point. So in here, you'll have entered your March statement balances in here. So these white boxes are where you enter the statement balances at the 31st of March. And then Scribe will do this calculation in the bottom here in the grey boxes. So this 0 is absolutely fine. Don't ever be alarmed if you see a -0. It's just sometimes that the calculation works. If it's 0, it's absolutely fine. So when we run through here, by clicking Save and Next at the bottom to produce the report. And again, hopefully this is all something that you do on a regular basis. And again, hopefully you're saving that report. So you're going to have this obviously at the 31st of March, because this is going to be your starting point of your box 8, your closing bank position. So if we scroll down, there are those statement balances that we entered here. And what we're looking for firstly is A equals B, checks out okay, meaning that we've reconciled everything correctly. There are no differences. If you are seeing a difference, there'll be a value here and you need to go away and obviously resolve it. You shouldn't be proceeding with the year end if you've got a difference, because there will be an anomaly on your accounts. The other thing that's also really, really important to have a look at, and is often overlooked actually, are the unpresented items that you may see here. Okay, so this top figure in bold here is the sum of my statement balances at the end of the financial year at the 31st of March. If I've got nothing unpresented, that would be my box 8 figure. If I have got things unpresented, Scribe will adjust for that, and this will be the updated box 8 figure that will feed into the annual return that we'll have a little look at later on. So if I've got unpresented items, the box 8 will change. If they're not correct to be there, we are in effect reporting an incorrect bank position. So it's really, really important to make sure that if you've got figures appearing here, that they are correct to be there. So you can review them by going to filter up in the top right-hand corner, dropping down from the summary and selecting either of them and clicking View Report. So these are the things that I've got as uncashed payments at this point. So things that I have paid but don't appear on the bank statement. So remember, this is really, really important. You have put it into the cash book, i.e. Scribe, because the council has made that payment. You have sent off the cheque, normally would be the example, but it's not appearing on the statement. So if your council use cheques, it's quite expected that you'll have unpresented items. If you pay by back, so online, it's instantaneous, you wouldn't expect to have anything unpresented in here. So if you're looking at this and thinking, oh, actually, that looks like a duplicate entry or something's wrong here, you need to go and resolve it. So zero it off, reverse it, whatever it may be that's incorrect. So I would strongly suggest that if every month you've got a lovely reconciling bank position, but actually you haven't considered whether you've got any unpresented items, I'd strongly suggest that you do that and have a look before we get to the end of the year. So if you want to look at receipts, you can do the same, just do that in View Report, and there they are. So just to clarify this for everybody, unpresented items are not things you should have paid. If you've got March invoices that you're not paying until April, they do not go on to Scribe as payments until you're paying them, i.e. in April. Okay, if you're working in receipts and payments, all you're interested in is when have you made that payment. It doesn't matter if it's dated March, if you received the goods in March, if you're paying it in April, it needs to appear in the accounts in April, i.e. in the new financial year on Scribe. If you're working in income and expenditure, you can consider adding them as creditor adjustments because you had the goods or services in March or earlier in the financial year, but because you're not paying them until next year, you might want to enter an adjustment. So do be really clear on that. The other thing I'm also going to mention is credit cards, because this is catching a lot of people out. Remember, if you're buying things on your card in March, but your card is not actually going to be paid off until April, it is not correct to enter them as March payments on Scribe, because you haven't actually bought those items on the card until the card is paid off. So a credit card at the end of the financial year should always have a balance of 0 because it's representing what you've actually purchased. Okay, so just a couple of things just to bear in mind when you're thinking about that, because this is something that we do see catches people out at times. Okay, but in this scenario, let's imagine that we're happy with my unpresented items for now. They are check items that haven't hit the bank, and therefore, if we remember that figure, that's going to be what we're seeing as our box 8 later on. Okay, any questions just about those bits that we just talked about in terms of the bank? Okay, super stuff. So I'm just going to pop next into reserves. And also just to mention, obviously, as part of all the checks and the year-end things is making sure that your reserve balances are correct, because obviously when you close everything and start to bring balances forward into next year, the closing balances of your reserves, so your right-hand column, will become your opening balances in the new financial year. So the split of your reserves isn't going to make a particular difference to your year end unless you do have to explain them because you have a significant number of reserves. It will appear on the balance sheet for those of you in income and expenditure, but part of your year end checks, I would expect you to be coming into here and just making sure that you're happy with the balances that you're seeing that will become the opening balances of the new financial year as well. Okay, so just a sort of reminder to come and review, check that everything's appearing correctly as part of that process. If you're in receipts and payments, it's also nice as well because this figure will be your box 8. If you're in income and expenditure, it will be your box 7 because it's your funds carried forward. So box 7 and 8 are the same for those of you in receipts and payments. So you may also want to keep a copy of this. As an aside to all of this, the report, that I show you, I would suggest that you keep copies of. I'm not going to sort of say that every single time, but just take it as a given that once you get into the point of having final figures reports ready to go, I would suggest that you keep copies, either you're printing them off or saving them somewhere. Once you've done this process on Scribe, you can lock the account down so nothing can change, and then everything's as it should be. But occasionally we do have people who either haven't locked it or go back in and amend something and then don't realise that's changed and they've got issues with their figures. So I'd strongly suggest 2 things. One is to have the report so that if anything does go awry, you can look back and see how you had it previously. And obviously it's good for your counsellors and everyone else to be able to review. And secondly, and I'll show you this at the end of the session today, that once you're happy with producing the figures, you lock the account. So you can go back and unlock it if you need to find later on that actually you've missed something, you need to make a correction. But initially, when you believe that you have finished the year end, I would suggest that you lock it so that it can't be inadvertently amended. Lovely. So the other thing just to mention as well before we go into our year end menu is VAT. So those of you who've been on any of my sessions, particularly getting ready for year end, and we had one yesterday, you may know that I like to go on about that a little bit. So apologies for that, but there is a good reason for it. And that is because we tend to find this causes real problems for people when we do the year-end health checks. This is often the main area where there are discrepancies. So Scribe, using the VAT summary, will maintain your VAT position in the background. I'm not going to go through sort of all the whys and wherefores in lots of detail here because that's covered in getting ready for year end. So I would suggest that you look at that if you haven't already, or if you think you've got a VAT issue. But just decide to say that at this point, so once we'll be on the 31st of March, this figure at the bottom here, that figure at the bottom there will be the figure that Scribe has calculated as your closing VAT position, i.e. the amount of VAT that you are owed at the 31st of March. Therefore, this should match the Form 126 claim that you're going to do to the 31st of March if you're not VAT registered, or if you're VAT registered, the VAT return to the 31st of March. Obviously, if you're VAT registered and the return dates don't quite line up, you'll just need to check that in there as well. And if you're not VAT registered, you don't have to do a claim to the 31st of March, but I would strongly suggest that you do. It might initially seem a little counterintuitive because I've got all of year end to deal with, I can't have that as well. But actually, it's a really good check, a really good point to have a claim that matches to this figure so that you can say, yes, Scribe is representing the amount of VAT that I'm now going to be claiming and receiving. So this figure firstly serves as a check to make sure that have we got all the VAT back that we are owed, or have we paid it? If we actually are VAT registered and owe VAT to HMRC, is it a correct representation? Because if there's a discrepancy here and it doesn't match, then potentially you're missing out on VAT you could have reclaimed. It's costing you as a council because you haven't been able to reclaim it. That's your first point of call. The second part of this is more relevant if you are an income and expenditure user. If you work in receipts and payments, it uses gross totals in the figures of the boxes on the annual return. So the way that you've dealt with VAT is less relevant because actually we're just dealing with gross totals. Everything that we've had in the financial year goes in there. If we're working in income and expenditure, this figure at the bottom will automatically become our VAT adjustment. So Scribe will use that. The only automatic adjustment that Scribe will enter for you when you're working in income and expenditure is the VAT adjustment, and it will be this figure. So if this is wrong and does not represent your VAT position at the 31st of March because something's gone awry in here, your accounts will not be correct. So you need to resolve it. So if you haven't looked at this before, please do so. And if you've got a problem, please revisit getting ready for year end so you can see the sort of common reasons why it is wrong. And if you're still ultimately stuck, let us know so that we can point you in the right direction. Because again, if you come into here and this figure is not representing the 31st of March position as you expect, you should not be proceeding until you've resolved it because it potentially means you're going to have issues in your accounts. Okay, so just wanted to be really clear